Chapter 24, Urinary Anatomy, Screencast 1. This first screencast will primarily be focusing on the kidney. Now, before we go into more detail about the kidney, we really need to address what are the components that actually make up the urinary system. And first that we have to look at is the kidneys. Kidneys are the workhorse of the urinary system. They primarily are responsible for removing waste products and converting filtrate into urine. So think of them as our filter for blood. The ureters, they are going to transport urine, and they're going to be moving urine from the kidneys to the bladder. The bladder is a muscular sac that actually stores urine and approximately 1 liter of capacity, and the urethra is responsible for eliminating urine from the body. So as I said, the real workhorse here are the kidneys. Everything else is either a tube or a storage for urine to move through. Now, if we look at the various processes that make up, that happen within the urinary system, most of these occur as the filtrate is converted to urine. This is generally how we eliminate metabolic waste. We also regulate the levels of numerous ions such as sodium, potassium, calcium. Our urine is the primary way in which we get rid of these ions or control. If we look at the regulation of blood pH, and that is going to be handled through how the kidneys actually handle hydrogen ion and bicarbonate. They play a significant role in the regulation of blood pressure, and that is through fluid balance. And then actually the elimination of biologically active molecules, and that is actually why a urine test is used as opposed to a blood test when they're looking for drugs. Now, some other functions of kidney that we may not be aware about or familiar with are the formation of calcitriol, and that is the active form of vitamin D. We've addressed previously the production and release of erythropoietin or EPO. Remember, this is a hormone that is responsible for increasing red blood cell production. And then also there's this possibility to engage in the process of gluconeogenesis. This is something that is going to occur during prolonged fasting or starvation. And generally, it's involving the production of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources. This is usually through the carbon skeleton of amino acids. And this is something that we must do to maintain glucose levels, as the only fuel that the central nervous system can really use is going to be glucose. Now here we basically have 2 images that are giving us an idea of the positioning of the kidneys and also the entire urinary system. This is the anterior view, and we basically can see where the kidneys are located. Now we have a posterior view, and this gives us an idea that the kidneys are not completely protected by the ribs, but we also see the rest of the urinary system from this particular view also. Now, if we look at the gross anatomy of the kidneys, there's 2 of them. They are symmetrical and known as bean-shaped organs. Their approximate size is of our hand to the second knuckle. If we look at a concave medial border, a hilum, we've actually seen that in quite a few structures that we've addressed recently. And remember, the hilum is where vessels, nerves, and the ureter connect to the kidney. There is a convex lateral border, and then the adrenal glands are sitting on the superior aspect of each kidney. Now here, if we look at the positioning of the kidney, it's going to be on the posterior abdominal wall. They are both lateral to the vertebral column, and as noted previously, only partially protected by the rib cage. This is why the kidneys are vulnerable to forceful blows to the inferior region of the back. Think kidney punches in boxing, below the belt, etc. And another term to keep in mind here is the term retroperitoneal. And the kidneys are positioned posterior to the parietal peritoneum. Now, if we look at what's actually supporting the kidneys, we actually have a fibrous capsule. This is going to be responsible for maintaining the shape of the kidney. This is made up of dense irregular connective tissue, and it is directly adhered to the external surface of the kidney. It also plays a role in protecting the kidney from trauma and also prevents pathogen penetration. There are two different types of fat. We have perinephric fat, and that is adipose connective tissue that is external to the fibrous capsule. This actually cushions and supports the kidney. The other type of fat that we have is perinephric fat, and that is the outermost layer surrounding the kidney. It's made up of adipose connective tissue also, and it also plays the role in cushioning and supporting the kidney. There is the renal fascia, and this is external to the perinephric fat. It is a dense irregular connective tissue and actually anchors the kidneys to surrounding structures. Now, there are a number of different clinical situations that are tied into the kidneys. One is known as renal ptosis. What this is, for some reason, there's been a downward movement of the kidney within the abdominal cavity. Generally, this may be due to loss of adipose tissue in elderly individuals, or may be seen in someone suffering from anorexia nervosa. The issue here is the ureter may actually kink, and this will block the flow of urine to the bladder, and there's going to be a backup of urine, and this results in a swelling of the kidney, and this is something that can very much end up with renal failure. If we look at renal angiogenesis, this is the failure of a kidney to develop. Generally, this is asymptomatic if unilateral and only one kidney is impacted. It is a fatal condition if it is a bilateral condition, if hence both kidneys fail to develop. Something known as pelvic kidney, the developing kidney fails to migrate from the pelvic cavity. Horseshoe kidney, this is when the inferior parts of the left and right kidney are fused together. And there's also some individuals that actually have an extra kidney. And all three typically is asymptomatic. And this is known as supernumerary kidney. Now, the next thing that we want to look at is the actual sectional anatomy of the kidney. There are going to be two regions of functional tissue: the outer renal cortex and the inner renal medulla. So keep in mind these are regional terms, and there are also renal columns. These are the extensions of the cortex that actually project into the medulla. And then there's renal pyramids. You may also hear them called medullary pyramids. They're the part of the medulla that's divided by the renal columns. They have a wide base at the external edge of the medulla and meets the cortex. Also, at the medial apex, there is the renal papilla of the renal pyramids. We'll have a renal lobe. Renal lobe is a renal pyramid in the portion of adjacent renal columns, and they go from the renal cortex external all the way to the base. The renal sinus, these are a medially located urine drainage area, and they're organized into minor calyces, major calyces, and the renal pelvis. Minor calyces are funnel-shaped structures of the renal pyramids, and they merge to form major calyces. And the major calyces merge into the renal pelvis. Now here we can actually see the structures that were just addressed, and I'm going to kind of do a review here. So what's been highlighted is an actual lobe. We can see that is containing both the cortex and the medullary region, and here's a pyramid. We can see the renal pelvis here, and remember this is where major calyces will funnel into. Here we have the major calyx, and here we have the minor calyx. Remember, this is the sinus area in which urine will be draining into. We see the renal columns, which are separating the pyramids from each other. Here we see the hilum, and within that hilum, we see the vessels, the ureters, feeding into and out of the kidney. We can basically see the numerous renal pyramids that are making up the medulla of the kidney overall. Now, when we look at how the kidney is innervated, the most important is going to be the sympathetic innervation. It is innervated by both divisions of the autonomic nervous system, but we really don't know what the impact or the overall effect of the parasympathetic nervous system is on kidney function. We are very aware of the role of the sympathetic nervous system, and if we look at the blood vessels of the kidney and the juxtaglomerular apparatus, basically sympathetic activation of the kidneys is going to decrease the production of urine.